for that, the Cabinet Affairs Office is going to be deploying you one more time on the road. This is a mini road trip, though. This is not a full road trip, because we have about 5 weeks left in the legislative session. 5 weeks, if you want to say they'll have intense negotiation on bills the last 2 weeks or so, 3 weeks maybe. We have about 2 weeks left to do the final push in terms of communication. And we're going to do one more round of editorial boards, community meetings, et cetera. And it's important. First thing you run into is they'll say, well, I thought everything was done already. Truth is, we did a lot of good work in the budget. We got most of our good work done in the budget. We even got some pieces of legislation passed before the budget. But there is still important work that needs to be done down at the end. Women's equality agenda, choice, and we're working to put together a choice coalition. There are then 9 other points that in many ways could not be more timely, because the women's equality agenda, it makes the basic point that women are victimized and are discriminated against, and it's all across society. Recent events, not just in Albany, everything that's going on with the military, it all makes the same point over and over and over again. And it's time for a women's equality agenda, and that's number 1. The restructuring panel for local governments is really exciting. We've all talked about the problem of the upstate localities for a long time, and how they are financially insolvent and need to be restructured. We now have a proposal to put together a panel that can recommend real financial restructuring for local governments that are insolvent. We have a moment to do it, because they've talked about this for years, but on the theory of nothing happens until you have a moment that catalyzes the movement. We have a piece of legislation called binding arbitration that is expiring. Everybody wants to get binding arbitration renewed. We want to get this restructuring panel done, and we're using the binding arbitration discussion to fuel the restructuring panel. But that is critical, and it's a no-brainer, so to speak, but that has to be done this session. The casinos, we've been developing the plan. It's more refined. What the casino discussion does is it also forces the Indian gaming discussion, which is not a bad thing. You have these situations with the tribes, many tribes all across the state that have just been in disagreement and have been in disagreement for years. You have situations where tribes are under a contract to pay revenue, and they haven't paid revenue in years, and it just goes on like in limbo. We're using the casino legislation where we have to decide what regions we bid or not, to say to the tribes, are you in good standing? If you're in good standing, we won't bid your contract. If you're not in good standing, then we're going to bid the contract. We settled the Oneida Indian issues with Oneida County and Madison County, and this was a conflict that had gone on for years and years. It was going absolutely nowhere, but the casino issue actually brought an energy to that, and we focused. But that's a piece of legislation that's going to move, hopefully this year. The Long Island Power Authority, which is Long Island specific, obviously, but is very, very important, so-called LIPA. It was Richard Kaufman's introduction to Albany. I don't know a better way to get introduced to Albany than through a LIPA restructuring. Got to meet the Senate and the Assembly and find out how government works in Albany. And then the reform agenda. The reform agenda is in response to the quote-unquote bad acts of recent weeks that people have read about in the newspapers, the charges by the prosecutors, resignations. Again, another opportunity to say, okay, let's use this as a moment to reform and do good things, and the legislature's focused and the people of the state are focused, so let's make meaningful change. And I think that's very true. The fallback is, well, what if the legislature doesn't want to do it? We'll do it with we'll enact a Moreland Commission, which is a totally appropriate and effective vehicle to get at the basic issues, which are about enforcement and disclosure, specifically around the Board of Elections, which is an executive agency, which is entirely appropriate for a Moreland Commission. We used the Moreland Commission on the LIPA report, the Long Island Power report, looking at utility response after Storm Sandy. It worked extraordinarily well, and is still working well. And we posed that same option to the legislature when we initially did JCOPE, if you remember. You know, life is options, but at the end of the day, we need to get reform one way or the other. So that's the short legislative agenda. Also remember, at the end of the day, we want to do the reform agenda. We also want to do the people's business. We need to keep government moving. We need to keep getting things done. And the number one issue is still moving the economy and jobs, and everything else is a distant second and third. The state unemployment numbers that came out last week was great news for the state. I mean, that was significant progress. It's a herky-jerky economy, but those numbers were really, really good news. And it's about jobs, and that's our number one issue. If we have a number two issue, it's going to be about education. And that takes us to our first presentation. It's a pleasure to have the Chancellor here with us today. This administration has an aggressive partnership with the SUNY system. Different administrations have taken a different posture vis-a-vis SUNY. We said from day one that, number one, as an educational institution, it's invaluable, and we want to work to improve it and better it. I don't believe SUNY has gotten the attention that it's needed in the modern past. And second, in terms of economic development, SUNY is the engine. We've all sat and talked about where the economy is working. It's always working in regions where you have the partnership with institutions of higher learning, almost across the board. And SUNY is our vehicle. And we've been doing a lot of exciting things, and hopefully we have some more good news on that before long. But with that, let me turn it over to first Deputy Secretary Jim Malatras, who's going to give us an update on the educational agenda, and then we'll hear from the Chancellor.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, members of the Cabinet. Upon taking office, Governor, education was much like this picture, stuck in the past and unprepared to meet the challenges of educating our children to be successful in the global economy. It was expensive, inefficient, and underperformed. The state needed bold, new, and innovative thinking.
Was I in that picture, Jim?
I'm going to show you who's actually in this picture. Before continuing, I wanted to thank Secretary Larry Schwartz for letting us use his 5th grade class picture. That's him in the back row with the circle. Thank you, Larry. I'm going to pack my bags now. These challenges are the reason why you convened the new New York Education Reform Commission of leading thinkers and stakeholders led by Dick Parsons. Their job was to develop an actionable set of recommendations to begin to transform New York's education system, and they responded with their first bold action plan in January. Unlike previous education commissions, where reports sit gathering dust upon a shelf, due to Governor Cuomo's leadership and the work of the commission, the action plan became a reality. And it happened with great speed. We accomplished virtually everything the commission had proposed. First, to improve early education, we established the state's first full-day pre-K program. Schools will be eligible to apply for this program next month. Second, the state will pay the cost of schools that extend their school day and/or year. Applications will also be available next month for next school year. Third, the state will fund community schools across New York to centralize needed programs and resources in distressed communities. Moreover, state agencies will offer priority funding to the community schools. Fourth, we enacted a series of reforms to increase teacher performance. First, we created a new rigorous teacher bar exam, which will be required for all new teachers starting in 2014. We will also provide $11 million in performance awards to the best and brightest teachers across the state. Chancellor Zimpher will discuss this program next. Finally, we will continue to support innovative public-private sector partnerships with leading companies like IBM to better link K-12 preparation with the emerging needs of the job market. In addition to the Commission's work, we've continued to make significant investments in education and are changing the education paradigm. We will award another $50 million to districts for management efficiency and academic performance grants. About 40 schools were recognized and received awards this school year. We implemented a teacher evaluation system for every school in New York State. And finally, the state continues to make a substantial investment in education funding, over $1 billion in new education spending this year alone. Governor, under your leadership, education has begun to move from the past to the future. These programs will help prepare our students for brighter and productive lives. Finally, a brief note on the Education Commission. The Education Commission will continue their work, hosting several symposia with experts across the country. That process begins tomorrow here in Albany. The Commission will submit their final report in September. I'd now like to turn it over to our great Chancellor, Nancy Zimpher, who will discuss the new Master Teachers Program.
So I'll take the mantle from our great Deputy Secretary, who's also clicking for me, so I have to be nice to him. Governor Cuomo, thank you very much for your leadership in all things educational and actually the wisdom of forming this commission, the Reform Commission. I was a member of the commission. We did hearings all over the state, met a lot, and are continuing to meet to carve out a set of recommendations that you can see the state is implementing. So cabinet members, it's a thrill to be with you as well. Dick Parsons is a delight. He chairs the commission. He gets a lot of things done, and he's nice about it. He has a good sense of humor. I think what we did in the initial report, and we will continue to do, is look at education as a continuum from birth through career, sometimes called cradle to career, sometimes called the education pipeline. So the fact that the state is investing more in early childhood is at the beginning of that pipeline. And today you will hear how we are investing at the master teacher level and how universities across the SUNY system are going to contribute. So it is literally a cradle to career initiative. And it makes a lot of sense that today we announced the New York State Master Teachers Program. So I wanted to talk specifically about the role of the teacher in the classroom. And we have tons of studies about what matters most in the classroom, and the one unequivocal, indisputable element of good learning is good teaching. In fact, if the student has the good fortune to have a great teacher repeatedly, those students are really going to perform. But we also know if a student has a not so good teacher repeatedly, they get so far behind they can't catch up. So the fact that we've put good teaching, great teaching at the center of the New York State Master Teachers Program is really remarkable. And we should reward good teachers for their good teaching and for their leadership. So in this context of rewarding high-performing master teachers, the model is that we will select the best teachers across the state of New York to serve in this New York State Master Teacher Program. They will receive a stipend of $15,000 annually for 4 years, a $60,000 investment in our best teachers who will make a commitment to really be leaders in the field, and in this case, to help novice teachers in their first few years of teaching, and teachers who are learning to teach the pre-service students in our universities be better, and particularly in the STEM fields. And I think master teacher is a concept that we can roll forward. We're really focusing today on the STEM fields, but we know that the core, the Common Core is coming, and it's about English, language arts, about math, and about science. So these master teachers will eventually help us across a number of fields. But clearly, the STEM needs are high a high demand and a key component of the Common Core. And also, as we've talked, foundational for students to be able to come to college, ready for college, not have to do remedial or developmental work. So these are the disciplines that cause the most trouble, and these are the ones that we need better instruction in. And so we're taking a page out of a wonderful program that Jim Simons, a great New Yorker, founded called Math for America. And representing Math for America today is John Hewing, who is president of that initiative. And so we're going to use the content of Math for America, math and science, to be the curriculum for these master teachers. And SUNY faculty will actually help develop the curriculum so that a master teacher can be a mentor teacher to beginning teachers and teachers in the pre-service pipeline. So selection is key. You know, how are we going to determine that we're really getting the best teachers? So we've created a number of hurdles that we think will prove that they present to us their teaching portfolio, the gains they've made with their classrooms. So selection is key. Then not every great teacher is really ready to be a mentor teacher, so we really need to give teachers the professional development they need so that they know how to help beginning teachers. And these mentor teachers, these master teachers, will then help further design the professional development for the beginning teachers. So the eligibility of highly effective comes again, minimum of 4 years of teaching experience, New York State teaching license, and a course load of at least 60% in the STEM fields. So this mentoring process really brings us initially a number of about 250 of our best and brightest STEM teachers. Bonuses beginning, selection beginning this fall. We're on a very, very tight timeline. I'm grateful that 4 SUNY institutions have stepped up in the Mid-Hudson Valley. It will be SUNY New Paltz, in the North Country, SUNY Plattsburgh, in Central New York, SUNY Cortland, and in Western New York, Buffalo State. We actually prepare about 5,000 teachers a year. We dispatch those teachers mostly to New York State classrooms, so this really should work. We have a process for application, a tight timeline. We hope to announce these teachers September 1. Some of you are old enough to remember Lee Iacocca, and he was once quoted as saying, "In a truly rational society, the best of us would be teachers, and the rest would have to settle for something less." Isn't that cool? Thank you. Thank you, Governor.
Very
Thank
nice.
you, Jim.
Very well done. Questions? Comments? Richard?
Chancellor, thanks very much. So I spent some time in the classroom myself, so I'm curious what the feedback has been from teachers about this program.
Well, I think the best thing to say is that as we traveled across the state for the Education Reform Commission, repeatedly teachers want to be recognized for excellence. I think it's fair to say that there are different ideas about how you recognize teacher excellence, but by giving these teachers an additional responsibility in the hierarchy so that they are mentoring beginning teachers, we're able to capture some of the time of the best teachers and pay for it. So that's positively received by teachers. They want it to be a fair and open selection process. They want to have input into what the criteria are, and I think from all these hearings and from the work of the commission, we've got a lot of input on this idea.
And it ties back to the teacher evaluation because they had to be highly effective to be qualified for this. Mr. Losky?
Thank you, Governor. Jim, are all the teacher evaluation deals now in place?
Every school has an approved teacher evaluation system except one, and that is New York City. That plan will be finalized by June 1st. They are going through their arbitration process that the governor established in the budget this year, and Commissioner King will make his recommendation and implement his plan on June 1st.
Who actually makes the decision who gets into this program?
Well, we have to create a small working group that will be apart from the Deputy Secretary of Education. Some of the SUNY people will probably cherry pick a few of the commissioners who really appreciate and understand this idea. We are in a very tight timeline, so we're announcing June 1st, and we're going to be ready to go September 1.
Governor,
Peter?
is there an effort to expand it sooner or later beyond STEM?
Yes, not only expand it beyond STEM, but it's expanded to every region in the state. So we're starting with 4 regions, but our goal is 10. And we're starting with STEM, and really because of the ideas that Jim Simons brought to us around math, and math being a portal discipline. However we thought about our own education, math is absolutely necessary early, often, and it walks you right into college. So we need to start there, and science as well. In fact, the whole of the STEM portfolio. But I think our goal would be to maintain this program in perpetuity and get as many disciplines involved as possible.
Anything else? On the pipeline, your point about the pipeline, Chancellor, the cradle to career, I had the Regional Economic Development Council heads in last week, and I did a thing, E squared, which is the same thing, the education, economic development continuum, and we had it on one line, and we had
Right.
primary education, and then we were focusing really on the tech transfer area with the incubators, et cetera. But that, to the extent the REDC are the regional businessmen, the business academia relationship still needs to be massaged. It's not a natural fit. And it dawned on me at the meeting and the discussion afterwards, they don't really see the natural alliance between business and higher ed. The younger ones do. It's more of a new tech business, but the older ones don't. So working it from the REDC side, as well as I think from the college president's side, both coming together, because where it does work better, for example, Western New York, as we know, that works well there, that connection. Where it works well, it's all the difference in the world.
Well, I think we have to put some tactical options in front of our business partners. So even today, we have a 2-day workshop on building more internships and co-op experiences. That's something tangible that businesses can see that they can invest in. So the idea would be that we require a co-op or internship program in as many of our programs as is possible, like applied learning experiences. And then we use the businesses across the state to provide those internships. They do typically, we want them to pay for them, but the cost is not as great as a full-time employee. They get to look at the student. We were talking about this, Commissioner Rivera, the other day at a workforce development workshop as well. They pay, but they get a bird's eye view of who they're going to hire. Our students graduate faster with less debt because they get paid, and they get jobs here in New York. So I'm just saying one idea for bringing them together is to have a vehicle, and that vehicle can be our students because they're the crosswalk between the campus and the corporation.
Anything else on this? Okay, we'll
Thank
now
you.
go to Mr. Larry Schwartz, who's a good-looking young man in 5th grade. Larry, really distinguished.
Just for the record, Governor, nothing's changed since then.
I've noticed, it was obvious.
What's a little gray?
Yeah, a little gray.
Governor, clearly, public safety has been one of your priorities since you've taken office, and keeping our roads safe and keeping New York drivers safe clearly falls in that category. One of the things that you tasked your administration and working with the Department of Motor Vehicles and the Council's office and Jeremy Creelan, we worked on a number of regulatory reforms back in last year. And we want to talk about some of the great accomplishments in just an 8-month period that through these regulatory reforms, we've gotten many dangerous drunk drivers off our roads today. Here's the scope of the problem. Every year, more than 300 people are killed. Over 6,000 are injured on New York highways as a direct result of alcohol-related crashes. I think what's more disturbing is that these crashes involving alcohol are 10 times more likely to cause a fatality than crashes that do not involve alcohol. Today, more than 47,000 drivers with valid license have 3 or more alcohol-related convictions in their lifetimes. 17,500 of those drivers have been involved in a crash that injured or killed someone after their third conviction. What our regulatory reform goal was to try to keep as many of these repeat offenders off our road. In 2006, the state legislature passed what is deemed to be called a permanent revocation law. Unfortunately, that law, it had nothing to do with permanency, and it was filled with loopholes. Drivers with 3 or more DWIs could go back to DMV to get relicensed after a 5 to 8 year suspension period, and unfortunately, many of these individuals did get their licenses reinstated after their suspension period. So there was nothing permanent about the 2006 law that got passed. In addition, drivers with only 1 or 2 DWIs were relicensed as long as they took, the DMV's drunk driving program, which within 7 weeks' time, they could have gotten their license reinstated, even if it was a restricted license. As part of our effort in 2012, we issued new regulations that gave New York among the toughest protections in the nation against drivers who persistently drive while under the influence of alcohol or drugs. Here's just one example of those reforms. Today, anybody with 5 or more alcohol or drug driving offenses, once their license was suspended, their license now will be permanently denied. So if they tried to come back to DMV to get their license renewed, they would receive a permanent denial. We believe many people that currently have a suspended license as a result of 5 or more will never come back to DMV as a result of these regulatory changes. In addition, people with 3 or 4 alcohol or drug driving offenses, plus 1 what's called a serious driving offense. That's somebody involved in a fatal crash, somebody who's had 20 points over the last 25 years, or someone that's received 2 5-point convictions. These are generally people for excessive speeding, more than 20 miles an hour over the legal speed limit. These individuals now, in addition to the current law that suspends their license for about 5 to 8 years, will have an additional 5 years tacked on if they seek to have their license renewed as well. In addition, if somebody is convicted of a non-alcohol drug offense and the driver has 3 or 4 alcohol or drug driving offenses without any serious driving offense in the last 25 years, these people will have extra years tacked on to their suspended driving license, plus will have an interlock system required as part of getting their license restored. An A2 problem driver restriction would include or require allowing a motorist only drive to and from their place of employment, only during their hours of employment, as well as dropping their kid off to school or to daycare. And you can see there's a number of other restrictions that are imposed on A2 problem drivers' restricted licenses. Again, before the 2012 reforms, people who received a DWI or a DWAI who completed the drunk driving program would be relicensed as little as 7 weeks. Again, now drivers who have 1 or 2 DWIs must serve their full suspension or revocation period, which is anywhere from 6 months to a year, prior to be considered for relicensing. As a result, in just 8 months, over 3,100 persistently dangerous drunk drivers have been kept off the road. As you can see, a breakdown here, 1,658 have received permanent denials, 1,500 have received an additional 5 years, plus restrictions on top of the 5 years once and if the license is renewed, including an interlock for 5 years. And 600, nearly 700 people have been relicensed, but with the A2 restriction and an interlock for an additional 5 years. None of these applications were approved without either the A2 restriction and/or the interlock. So, Governor, we've clearly, in just a very, very short period of time, have gotten quite a few people, or kept quite a few people off our roads, and this number will only grow. And I believe that 47,000 number that we showed you earlier will, over time, evaporate to next to nothing.
Great. Well done for the whole team that's been working on this. Jeremy, all the people at DMV, Barbara. Questions? Courtney?
Sorry, I had a question. Impressive statistics, but this is a question more as a parent who has young kids who will be driving soon. Do we have statistics on how dangerous it is to text while driving?
Well, Courtney, one of the things that we found out is through all our enforcement efforts and education efforts with drunk driving, we've been able to get the number of arrests down and the number of stops down as a result of all those efforts. The next place that we need to make that same kind of tough enforcement effort as we've done on drunk driving is the area of texting while driving. And at the governor's direction, we've been working on an initiative to come up with tougher enforcement ideas and on texting while driving. And I believe, hopefully by the end of the week, the administration will have something to announce regarding texting while driving.
So it's going to be the next generation issue. The way we talk about alcohol, and we have been talking about alcohol and driving for many, many years, it's going to be texting and driving. And it's hard because it's a bad combination. It's young people especially who are wed to that device, right? It's part of their brain. And they're driving, and they're not really experienced drivers, and they're putting the two together, which is a very bad combination. We're working on it now. The numbers are going the wrong way on texting and driving. We're making progress on this issue. We're not making as much progress on the other issue. Any other questions on this? Okay. Thank you very much for doing the last round of, I know the ed boards in the community and the travel is a pain in the neck. Think of it this way. It's the last round until next January when we go out on the State of the State. So that's the good news. It's also not snowing. That's the good news. Glass half full. Questions from the press?
Governor, I have a question about the education reform that you were talking about, or Mr. Malachis was talking about. Firstly, the bar exam for teachers. I know that the Education Department had already planned to start using the teacher performance assessment that I believe was developed by Pearson and Stanford University in 2014. I'm wondering if the bar exam that you're referring to is the same thing, or is it different? And if it's different, why is it different? And will they have to take both?
Good question, Mr. Malachis.
Both. We wanted to add more rigor to the process. That was something that was important to the commission. So SED.
But the thing I'm talking about is this program where the prospective teachers will have to be videotaped in the classroom during their student teaching program, and that will be a part of their certification process.
It's a whole thing. What the commission concentrated on was the actual certification exam at the end, much like a law bar exam, to make sure the teachers that were going out of the teaching programs into the classroom were actually qualified. And so we're building more rigor into that process through SED right now.
So will be both of those additional components
Correct.
in 2014?
Correct.
Okay, and if I may, another question on a reform initiative. Also, Mr. Malachis, you said that 40 schools or school districts had gotten the competitive performance grants. If I'm correct, and tell me if I'm not, I think less than half of the money that was actually put aside for those performance grants was actually allocated. So I'm wondering, why is that, and does that signal that maybe those performance grants are not as effective as you had planned for them to be?
There were two real pieces to this. First, the governor also conditioned receiving any state money, whether it be school aid increases, performance grant money, on having a teacher evaluation system. Many schools at the time of the applications did not, so they're disqualified from this year. Second, which is also important, they're performance grants. So we just don't fund, it's not another funding mechanism for schools. If the applications did not meet the rigor of the process that the governor established, they were not awarded. So we wanted to build real rigor into it, and these 40 schools demonstrated significant education, academic or management efficiency performance that deserved the awards. This wasn't a question of quantity, it's a question of quality.
So what happened to the money that wasn't allocated?
We're rolling it over.
On DWI, do you support out of Washington the proposal to lower the BAC down to .05?
The lowering is something that we're studying right now. It wouldn't be a major shift for this state, but it's something we're looking into.
Governor, now that Vito Lopez has resigned, do you think this matter is closed, or do you think there will be any further, or should be further ramifications within the Assembly?
Well, for Vito Lopez, I don't know what other ramification it could have for Vito Lopez vis-a-vis the Assembly. So the Vito Lopez matter for Vito, I think, is closed as an assemblyman. I think the question then becomes, going forward, what reforms are you going to put in place? What lessons have you learned? What are you going to do to make sure you do the best reform modification to the system that you can to prevent that kind of activity in the first place? And I think that's something the Speaker is addressing himself to. And it's the last one until the next one, Zach. We tend to have a period of shock and awe when, politician acting badly, politician breaking the law, politician involved in some scandal. There's been a continuum, and so yeah, shock and awe until the next one, and hopefully you learn a little something. Each time you're making the system better, you're reforming the system, so you're making it harder for that type of activity to occur, and you're making sure that transgressor is punished fully and fairly, and the appropriate action has been taken. I think for Vito Lopez, the appropriate action was an immediate resignation, and after some fits and starts, that's where it wound up, and I think that was appropriate vis-a-vis Vito Lopez. Now, let's see what lessons there are to learn, move forward.
Governor, could you explain why you can call for Vito Lopez's resignation, as others did, even though he wasn't charged with any crime, but you don't feel it's appropriate to talk about the Speaker's leadership role in the Assembly?
I didn't say I didn't think it was appropriate to speak about the Speaker's role. With Vito, you're charged, there's an accusation. You should resign at an accusation. It depends, Mike. What evidence do you have on the accusation? How serious is the accusation? And everybody has rights, The accused also has rights. And we still have a system where you're innocent until you're proven guilty, et cetera. So that's sort of a case by case. On the Speaker, I've said it's a totally appropriate level of conversation. How was it handled? How should it have been handled? Can it be handled better? Now, we were waiting for the JCOPE report, which was exploring the entire matter, so we were waiting for facts before we commented, which is always nice when you can do that. And I think it's an appropriate level of discussion. It's an important topic. It's a societally important topic. As I said before, it goes to our women's equality agenda. And how does the Assembly handle complaints of sexual harassment is an important topic for women, for fathers, for brothers, for society. So I think it's a fine topic to discuss.
But not the Speaker's continued role as Speaker of the Assembly. You don't think that he should be...
It's not a topic, I just disagree. People say, I think the Speaker should resign for the way he handled it. I said, I don't. It's a fine topic, I just disagree.
Could you give just an explanation of why you don't feel he should be?
Well, they said what was put to me is that he should resign because what he did is like what Vito Lopez did. No. I believe the Speaker mishandled the complaint in the situation. It is different, however, than what Vito Lopez did, which was actually be the person who was abusing women, right? It's one is you didn't handle it well, the other is you actually committed the act. But do I think it's a totally legitimate topic, how the Assembly handles complaints of sexual harassment? Yes.
Governor, if the Speaker...
And did it handle it well? No. And should it handle it better? Yes.
Governor, in your view, if the Speaker then, or the Assembly does not take any action in response to this to address the shortcomings in the system, would that then rise to the level where you think the Speaker should step down?
Glenn, do I believe the Assembly should have a better system? Yes. And should they learn from this situation and improve their process? Undoubtedly.
And if they don't, does that mean that the Speaker...
I think they will have failed the people. The Assembly will decide who is the leader of the Assembly, right? They vote. I don't vote. I have no vote in that contest.
Well, where are you with the negotiations on the women's equality agenda?
We are moving forward. We're speaking with both sides on the 10 points. We're at various stages depending on which of the 10 planks in the platform you're speaking about, but we're speaking about all of them.
And you still intend on pushing that as a cohesive package?
Yes. Yes.
Do you intend to push public financing in elections?
Yes.
This session?
Yes.
And how so? What concrete ways?
Every way that I can push. We're down to the end. We'll be advocating for it publicly. We have been advocating for it publicly and working with the leaders to pass it.
Considering, though, that it seems to be a no-go with Senate Republicans at this point, at what point do you feel like you can get, say, the independent oversight of the Board of Elections, which they've signaled to be open for, as opposed to public financing?
Well, your point, Nick, is when is it over? It's over when it's over. It's over when the bell rings. That's when it's over. And we're a long way from over now. I understand their opposition to public finance. They've been clear. They've actually gotten more clear as time has gone on in print pieces, et cetera. I understand that. I understand, by the way, this was not a revelation, right? Issues like public finance, issues like choice, are long-standing issues where positions have been clear. I am pro-choice. I'm not pro-choice this year. I've been pro-choice every year, So, and everybody sort of knows the state of play coming in. But I understand their position on public finance. I disagree. We're talking it through. Your point is they seem like they're adamant. Yes, they seem like they're adamant, and we'll see between now and then. And at one point, it's over. And what we don't get done, we fail to get done at that point.
Governor, how are the binding arbitration talks coming? Are you making headway in resolving that?
They are going well, but Rick, it's sort of, we've had this conversation before. It's a funny rhythm to a legislative session. You talk, and then everything sort of heats up the last 1 week, 2 weeks or so, and people's positions become more clear. Because remember, it's not a one-on-one. There's several people on most issues in the mix. So people tend to talk and listen and hear and assess the situation, and then everything moves down at the end. But the financial restructuring panel, I believe, is one of the most important pieces of work we can do this year. Because look, it is about, we talk process issues often, and that's important, government process. Government product is also important, and we shouldn't lose sight of that. Jobs is the product. The upstate economy is the product. Economic development is the product. And the plight of local governments in upstate New York is a serious crisis and has been for years. It has been unaddressed. It has been denied. We have procrastinated, and I'm saying let's call it what it is and take it head on and work on restructuring these governments. So that panel is critically important, I think.
Governor, did the Speaker err in not telling you about Vito Lopez's transgressions early last year?
He has no responsibility to inform me of Assembly business. That's totally up to him.
First time You read the whole Jacob report then was last week?
First time, say again?
You read the whole report about Jacob was last week when everyone got it publicly?
Yes.
Is that a problem? Do you feel that you should know these details much earlier?
No.
Why not?
It's not my jurisdiction.
The Rensselaer County Clerk has refused to issue publicly any records of pistol permit applications. He says that his way of complying with the provision of the SAFE Act, which allows permit holders to opt out from having their information disclosed, is rather than to sort through those applications, to simply withhold from disclosure all pistol permit application data. I'm wondering what state action, if any, you think is appropriate in this instance.
Well, Jimmy, I'd like to look at the facts, but I don't believe that's the law. The law was the person had a right to declare privacy, basically, and opt out of having their information made public. But that's not a blanket. That's not for a county clerk to do as a blanket basis. It's not my reading of the law.
So what action, if any, is appropriate?
Well, it depends on, let me get the facts of what the clerk is actually doing, but that clerk is not upholding the law. And the job is, you can't decide what the law is or change the law. You know, their job is to enforce the law administratively. But let me find out the actual facts.
Can you comment on the letter your administration sent to the clothing company run by Khloe Kardashian and her husband regarding the Agricultural Department trademark?
Not really. I wish I could in some ways, because would at least be a little more interesting than what I normally do. My understanding is that was basically sent out as a copyright infringement letter on a sort of pro forma monitoring basis. Who did we say sent the letter, do we remember?
Department of Agriculture.
Department of Agriculture? You sent the letter to the Kardashians.
There was a letter notifying them that they had indeed infringed on our logo for Pride of New York.
Have you received any response?
As of right now, I'm not sure. I haven't been in the office yet today. If there has been a response, it's been today.
Do you think that actually hurt or helps the logo of New York?
Help New York. I'm not sure. I think the Pride of New York's a good logo.
Be careful of that, Commissioner, now. You think these jobs are easy?
Governor, again on the Women's Equality Act, we haven't seen the specifics of it in writing yet. Post-Vito Lopez, are you making any changes to what you will be seeking?
No. Look, if you go back and look at what we were talking about in the State of the State in January, it's directly applicable here. You know, to the extent somebody wants to say, oh, look what happened. We discovered a problem called sexual harassment because of this Assemblyman Vito Lopez. No. We know about the problem. We know about it for years. We know about it for decades. It shows its ugly face in many different manifestations, but it's all across society. It's government, it's the private sector, it's the military, it's everywhere. So no, there are no surprises here. And the laws, there's no change. If anything, I think it's made the argument for the women's equality agenda, and it's made the point how necessary this agenda is this session. I think it actually helps make the case.
The IDC a couple weeks ago announced that it would propose its own women's agenda, specifically a working women's agenda dealing with pay equity issues as well as child care subsidies and some other issues. Senate Democrats and some women's groups said that they thought it would be a distraction from your agenda, and I'm wondering if you would support it or if you think it is a distraction from your.
I would support it if they number theirs 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, right? As long as it's above the 10, that's fine. It's not to replace the 10 that we've proposed.
Would you be willing to work in some of their ideas to yours?
Above the 10? Sure.
With the 10 points, is it all or nothing? If you can't get all 10, are you going to settle the whole thing?
There is no reason not to pass all 10. especially today, I believe the argument for all 10 has gotten stronger, and I want all 10 passed.
Considering the block over abortion, is that realistic?
Well, as I said to Nick's question, you're stating their position today. There's tomorrow and the day after and the day after and the day after, and we have several weeks.
Considering how long Republicans have opposed this, do you expect to change their minds in 6 weeks?
You know, people, their revelations happen all the time.
Governor, I know you commented on the Siena poll earlier today, but are you worried that given all the scandals, given all the arrests and the claims of investigations, that there's going to be any sort of destabilizing effect on the legislature that will make it difficult to get what you want done by the end of June?
I think, call me an optimist, I think it's going to help us get the agenda done. Because I think the legislature is going to realize what you just said, which is there's been a lot of bad publicity about the New York State legislature, and that then becomes writ large. You know, Nick, it's not Democratic legislator, Republican legislator, it's not assemblyman, it's not senator, it's just the New York State legislature. I think that's how they perceive it, and I think they're right. There's been bad publicity. You know how you counter bad publicity? Good publicity. You know how you get good publicity? Do something. Pass bills that help the people of the state of New York. And I think, if anything, that's going to fuel their desire to actually get a lot of this agenda done.
Governor, the same poll found that 88% of New Yorkers surveyed thought that they would see another lawmaker in handcuffs in coming weeks. Are you one of those 88%?
Look, Jim, is that what they said, literally in handcuffs? Look, if you are anyone who, you know, is semi-observant, as I said before, today's Vito Lopez, shock and awe. They're not in shock and awe. And they weren't in shock and awe 2 weeks ago when there were several politicians. And they weren't in shock and awe when I did the Alan Hevesy case and when I did the Pedro Espada case. You know, this is a constant drumbeat. Oh, constant drumbeat of government corruption. No, constant drumbeat of corruption. Government, private sector, people going to jail, sex scandals. This is not new. It didn't start in Albany, and frankly, it's not going to end in Albany. It's Washington. It's every aspect of society. So when they say, do you think you'll see more elected officials getting into trouble? Sure. Now, if you had said to them, do you think you'll see more newspaper reporters getting into trouble? Yeah. And more board of directors? Yeah. And more bankers? Yes. Yes. And they're right.
Practically speaking, though, with 5 weeks left in the legislative session, do you expect more indictments and/or charges against sitting lawmakers?
Oh, are you asking me in the next 5 weeks? Yeah. I have no reason to expect anything, no.
Why is that?
Because I have no reason to expect anything. Would I be shocked? No. But do I have any reason to believe anything? No.
But Governor,
now, if a member of the LCA was indicted in the next 5 weeks, then that would be shock and awe.
But Governor, wouldn't you concede that what's been happening in Albany is worse in many ways than what's been happening in other states? This has gone national in terms of people talking about the number of arrests and seriousness of the charges.
Do I have a statistical analysis of New York versus other states? No. I'm saying, and is it unacceptable? 100%. But is it new? No. No. I mean, I sat in the AG's office. I did these cases every day, right? Those people, those of us who've watched Albany for a long period of time, there has been a constant. Elected officials, politicians get into trouble, like people all across society. I think it's important to remember that you can't paint everyone with the same brush, and you have a lot of elected officials and legislators in this town who work very, very hard, who do their duty, and I think it's unfortunate that sometimes they just get painted with the same brush. I think, as I said to Nick, I think it's actually, if anything, could be a positive in this session, because they could say, let's get some work done and let's show the state how good we're doing, which also came across in the poll. People say this is a government that is working better than before, or words like that, which is true. They've been passing laws, passing their budgets, et cetera. So I think it could actually help at the end of the session. But it's not, you know, do I believe there will be other politicians who get into trouble? Yes. Just like
It's been a constant. Are you saying you don't think that the last 5-6 weeks are any different than previous incidents?
There have been more. I mean, it's been extraordinary in the frequency, right? But is it the first time we've had corrupt politicians in Albany? No. No, I mean, I did the Alan Hevesy case. It was a controller, statewide elected controller. I mean, what went on with Pedro Espada, right? And all of that stuff for months, you know. So the frequency, the number, but it's not the first time there's been corruption in Albany.
Governor, you sometimes wish you were still Attorney General so you could prosecute.
Do I sometimes wish I was somewhere other than in the governor's chair? Yes, there are moments when I wish that. Okay, guys, thanks very much.